Welcome to another draft physics video presentation. Over there, there. Alright, is an animation of a fundamental function that could be part of the universe. Regular physics won't say this is a function. They won't show you a picture of it, an animation. But there's no physics that say it can't happen this way. And it just illustrates kind of an illusion of sorts. I mean, you have something that appears to just go back and forth, which would seem like, well, that's the same amount of pressure. It goes just as much this way as that way. But the little bit really doesn't go just as much one way as the other. It's going a little bit more in one direction because there's more distance as it's moving. The back end sort of catches up, and so it actually travels one way less than it travels the other way. So the idea would be as if in regular physics you could make a trap, make a wall attached to another wall by some mechanism, some even springs, that and you pushed one wall by hitting it, and there was a perfect reflection off that wall into another wall, and you trapped a piece of energy. That this would be the byproduct. And is the one wall, the forward wall, hit more force, the drag argument, as it hit more force, what it would be doing is consuming that force, in a sense, having a reaction. That would be the end of the wall. It would reflect back, but the back wall is still moving. It's the back wall didn't get hit. The front wall got hit. Back wall didn't get hit. So the back wall keeps moving, and the reflection happens even sooner. So that might be the next animation, is to point out that if the two walls can move, and one wall based on what it's hitting, the forward wall, that it would in fact become shorter. It would compress. Conventional physics sort of thinks that happens as things accelerate. They have length contraction. And so it's perfectly consistent with at least that notion of theirs. And the consequence would be is that the energy would increase because there'd be more hits going forward in a given amount of time to meet the opposing force. So as there's an opposing force, it contracts, the energy increases, and therefore the momentum increases to meet the challenge. So it would continue to move at its constant rate, even though it was being hit by more force. And so the more velocity you can give it, the more you can accelerate it, the more it will compress, and the more it will push forward, in theory. So just an example of a piece of what can be reasonable physics. It's no huge violation of any principle, and it shows how you take any input in is conserved, so to speak, the directional momentum. So it just has to do with which way is the first way. So if I throw the bit of energy in from any direction, the circle will move in that direction, theoretically, forever. And I would argue that that's the mechanism that keeps things moving in space. If I throw a wrench in space, it keeps going. If I throw something elemental, it doesn't keep going, something like just an electron or just a proton. So they're less able to overcome the obstacles. So I'd argue this is something that happens between electrons and protons, and not something that can happen in just an electron or just a proton. That's a draft statement at this point because the evidence is, non-conclusive. I'd say it's weighted towards the side that electrons don't have perpetual motion, but we'll just call it a gray area for now, till I need to assert otherwise. The thing we do know is that nucleuses do gain substantial velocity, little complex arrangements of matter, electrons and protons in association with each other, that those bits can travel through space using some kind of mechanism that allows them to maintain their momentum without it being dragged out of them. So anyway, just a proof of principle. There's no shenanigans here. All that's there is you have two surfaces. Energy enters in one direction, and that's all it is. And it moves, and then it stops, and then it moves, and it stops, and it moves, and it stops, because that's all that's in the equation. There's forward motion, a forward hit, causing momentum, causing movement, and then you stop it with the reflection. And that's all there is. No tricks. So anyway, I guess we'll go to comments, and then we'll do maybe some Ken Wheeler, just for fun. Alright, I'm back for the comment. So David Murphy says, you spelt your channel name wrong. There's a redundant R. Back to the daft physics. So little word games, little snarky ad hominisms and such. And so I could say, well, yeah, there's a lot of that misspelling going on. Your name should be Butthole Man, and you really spelled it wrong. Shit. I'm 5 minutes in. Okay, so it's physics. Don't want to have to keep pointing that out. But it's physics, and it's elemental physics, which, again, sort of depends on kind of a lot of understanding a lot of experiments and a lot of results and what they actually say versus the stories told. Like, do you really think the two-slit experiment proves there's multiverses? Do you really think so? Do you think LIGO proved that they can measure half the distance of a proton? Do you really think so? They showed us them doing it. They took some stuff and they measured a little tiny thing with their device. They did lots of testing and showed us lots of tests of all the amazing little tiny vibrations in reality they could detect. They did all that? Oh, wait a minute. No, they didn't. They had detectors on the two-slit experiment somewhere. Somewhere they had detectors. Yeah, they didn't do that. Anyway. I'm 5 minutes in and have an argument from incredulity. I don't know exactly what you're saying. And a series of straw man arguments. Okay, so you're proud of that? So you're arguing with somebody you think is obviously wrong or obviously stupid or obviously ignorant. And that's the best you can do, is incredulity and straw man arguments. Okay, it's pretty bad. Is that all you can do? Is that what you do in politics too? You just say, that guy's goofy looking. And that's how you decide how you vote? Anyway, because you lack an understanding of what it actually proposed by science. I guess you meant is. Okay. Part of your spelling problem. Yeah. So again, you're not going to illustrate that by quoting me misquoting physics. So why don't you just point out where I've said something about the theories and about the evidence that's fundamentally incorrect? I mean, why can't you just do your job here? Okay, I understand you don't agree. That's fine. You don't agree. But you have to not agree for some kind of good reason. You can't just say, I don't agree because I don't like the way you talk, I don't like the way you look, and my guys are super, and I it's like the Yankees against everybody else, and you're like a Yankee fan, and so you're just going to play this game like everybody else is really, really awful, and your team is really, really great. Is that all you're arguing from? It looks like it to me. Okay, you accused others of being arrogant. Yes, and I'm just saying, so you're saying a reasonable description of the behavior of the talking head science isn't arrogant. Arrogant's not a reasonable way to describe their behavior. Now, you could say I'm also arrogant or something, but I would argue that I'm not using misinformation. I'm not glibly just sloughing off all the questions and saying they don't need any explanation. Where are they sitting there with a chalkboard defending their mush? And I've showed them when they do have a chalkboard, they say preposterous things like this big giant wave, in the field, this big field gyration, okay, that that's thousands of atoms big affects one tiny electron. They'll say things like that, and you're saying, well, how can that happen? And, well, of course, they'll never answer that. So that's part of their arrogance. They say they know the truth, and yet in their truth is preposterous nonsense. Again, I could just go back to the twin paradox. The absolute fact has to be one of them has to have more velocity than the other one. Do you believe something else? Well, what's your notion? They just pretend that because the Earth is big and the spaceship is small, we're going to say the spaceship is now moving faster because it moved away from the Earth. I mean, you just have some magical rule you make up? Or is there some sort of absolute rule that says, yes, one of them has to actually go a lot faster than the other one, meaning real velocity in real space for time dilation to work? That there is absolutely a real, you're going exactly 0 miles an hour and your clock is affected 0, right? There's actually some frame somewhere in the universe where something is sitting there going, my clock is totally unaffected. And there's somebody else's clock who's, 10 minutes off. Don't you think that's the reality? It doesn't work both ways, does it really? That the thing not moving is also dilated. So, yours is the incomprehensible, full of contradictions, full of mush, wave particle duality, little vibration sounds. You say that's sensible. That's a sensible conclusion. Let's write that in the rock of truth. It's both things. Please. Hate to use the word again, but pathetic. Okay. You accuse others of being arrogant, but have no idea how to do the most basic calculations. Well, you have no evidence of that. Okay, I can do basic calculations. I can divide things and multiply things and do all that stuff. And we know that some of these formulas aren't really just a formula. It's not like it's just add these two things and subtract this and multiply that. There's a funny symbol in there, that actually means do a completely separate equation and then put that completely separate result into the equation. So yes, they're a little tedious. And then you have these other things that have little integrals, and that means you have to do an averaging over the entire thing, which means you have to take little elements and compound them to create a good sampling. You have to sample, and the sampling means you have to do multiple equations from each location to get your average. So where have you proven I don't know how to do calculations? I don't think calculations are reality. Okay, I think concepts, principles, the little box move, little ball moving across the screen. I think that's reality. Reality is real things moving. Okay, it's not math. Math is helpful, it's useful, but it isn't. You wouldn't use math to describe anything else in the universe, really, right? I mean, you don't sit there and create a mathematical formula for the symmetry of a tree. You want to say, "Whoa, that tree's lopsided." You don't write out a whole mathematical theory and say, No, come on. It's a model. They're just defending and describing a model of the universe, and it's not all mathematical. The math reduces to real things like distances. There's real distances in the equations. There's real speeds. There's real variables. And I've pointed out how they've sort of broken the concept of those variables being consistent and meaningful by silly notions that because in one circumstance frequency equals energy, that it always does. And it always doesn't. Anyway. How can you know it's wrong if you don't understand it? So that's your assumption. You're making a claim that I don't understand the concept of math, or I don't understand how math is done, or any of that. And I'm saying, prove that, or make a more substantial claim against me. Okay, I do understand it. Yes, I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a professional mathematician. But being a professional mathematician, again, if you think this physical reality of physical things is made out of 2s and 7s and 9s, then I think you're really deluded. Yeah, that's all I can say. I don't think that's the reality. Math isn't the reality. It's an attempt, it's one way to describe relationships between variables, but it doesn't guarantee that you've gotten all the variables right, that you're... It's a pretty crude, sometimes, description of reality. Very insufficient. Just to say how much a tree weighs. That doesn't tell you what a tree is, does it? No. Alright. If relativity is crap, then how come GPS, which uses special and general relativity, works? So again, you say it uses. Do you have proof that that's how they figured it all out? Or did they notice there was a problem with the clocks? You know, once they needed clocks and satellites to be synchronized, and then they realized, hey, our clock isn't synchronizing correctly. And then they said, oh yeah, remember that special relativity stuff? Maybe it's that. But again, the arguments have been made that the math isn't perfect or anywhere close to it. You really don't use the math to pre-program your satellite. You adjust it as necessary. And again, I've made the counter argument that all this is a demonstration that velocity breaks clocks, and it breaks different clocks in different ways. And so you think that if I actually do speed you up to half the speed of light, that nothing's going to change in you physically. You'll just move slower. Right? That's what you think is going to happen, and I'm going to argue that no, your matter's going to be in big trouble. It's going to be unstable. You're going to change the stability of most of it, because all clocks aren't broken the same way. In a sense, we're a clock. We're a bunch of routines that take place at timed intervals, and all of those intervals are going to be messed up by the fact that there's going to be a bunch of compressions, and there's going to be a bunch of changes, and the changes aren't going to be all consistent. You're not going to shrink as much this way as you shrink this way, and it's not going to be a perfect little tiny miniature of yourself. It's going to be a mess. Okay, so good luck. I don't know. So you want to invest in it, go ahead and invest in it. All right. There's no correlation between the fact that there's no necessary reason to believe that the theories of relativity are completely wrong. They're recognizing the fact that velocity is significant and important. And again, the two theories basically are saying two different things. I mean, one says there's a speeding up of the clock, and the other one says there's a slowing down, and one's just a lot more than the other one is. So you can't even describe them and say, okay, they're both proving the case, because in some sense they don't both match. All right, how would you do the calculation? Again, why do I need to do a calculation? I've already argued the point. I can draw a model of it. You're bouncing on the surface of the Earth and moving in a direction. So you're moving a lot. The atoms inside of you are moving a lot more than the satellite. The satellite's bouncing very slowly because it's in weak gravity. You're in strong gravity, so you're bouncing very fast compared to the satellite. So even though the satellite's going faster than you in a direction, its bounce rate is much slower, and your bounce rate is much higher, and therefore you happen to be going a lot faster than the speeding satellite. And that's the irony of GPS, right, is that everybody thinks the satellites are time dilated, when no, it's us on the Earth who are time dilated. So, but whatever. Show me your workings. I just showed you the workings, okay? All I have to do is count the little up and down parts and measure that distance and say, well, how much distance is that more? Right? How much more distance is this compared to this? That's all I have to do. Okay, it's not a terribly complex calculation. And then once I know the distance difference, then I have to know what the clock is, right, to figure out how much that clock is going to be affected by velocity, because each clock will be affected differently. All right. you have no workings or no clue. Well, you have no evidence. See, what they haven't done is put, say, 3 different kinds of clock in an airplane and shot them around the Earth. So take isotopes from different substances, or take even some kind of mechanical clock, and do the same thing and see if all the clocks break the same way. See if they all break identically. Well, then you have another piece of evidence in your little, box of puzzle pieces. But there can't be clocks made of the same thing. If they're all pendulum clocks, well then that sort of makes it, wow, you can't really tell how they're broken. But that's all you've got. You've got this little tiny piece of evidence, and you're so confident that that's right, even though it's a little tiny bit of evidence. You're saying nobody else can talk about it, nobody else can suggest a different thing, and if they do, I'm going to insult them and berate them and harass them and do all this stuff. And why are you doing all that? What is the big threat? I might say something that is actually a better model. I might suggest something that makes more sense. Why are you, you're acting as if you're afraid of me. Like somehow I might catch on or something, and you think everybody's going to be duped by what? A better explanation? I mean, you're so aggressive. This is your arrogance, right? You're so aggressive in your defense. And again, the place you're arguing from isn't something like evolution. It's not like you have a ton of evidence. You have a tiny amount of evidence. Not much more to say. Okay, so here's another extra bit. Let's see what this is. The GPS and math works because he's not disputing math or formulas, you idiot. Well, I'm not claiming it works, so let's, I'll say it's close. It's a generalization, but they really don't use it. Okay, I mean, people who made money in GPS say, no, we don't bother with Einstein's equations. We see how it's working and fix it. Anyway, I thought I'd share the Cliff Notes version for those that don't have whatever hours to spend watching prior videos where everything has been discussed at great length. LOL. I don't know if that was a Cliff Notes, but fine. Let's see. Joined 1 day ago. Okay, so he's this channel with no content is now going to ridicule the channel that was invented yesterday. Wow. That's useful. You new to YouTube? Garvius. You certainly did a lot of watching of an obscure channel on your first day. Yes. I guess he did. Yeah. So this channel accepts the mainstream scientific consensus on special and general relativity in full, does it? Again, that's amazing bullshit. No, it accepts it just in the same circumstance I pointed out. All we have proof of, or evidence of, or an indication of, is that velocity breaks clocks. And it's an open question whether it breaks all clocks consistently. That's the facts. Now you want to claim that's not the fact, that they've proven otherwise? I'm saying then you're basically lying. You're being deceptive. That's not very good science, I'd say. I mean, when you can't admit you don't have a lot of evidence, that's not a very good scientific method. All right. Superior Mind chimes in. Basically, all one needs to realize is that matter is made from forces that travel at only one speed. That's why accelerating those forces is not possible. So all you actually are really doing is moving them a further distance, which slows down the internal functions of anything they comprise. When you accelerate towards the Earth and it stops you from moving, you haven't really stopped. You're still in an ongoing exchange of forces and extra distance, which is delaying internal functions. The point is the stuff moving the speed of light can be trapped, as pointed out in the opening animation. And then movement going the speed of light in a direction, momentum going the speed of light in a direction, turns into momentum going a lot slower. And that's what the entire universe is made of, is stuff that appears to be going a lot slower than the forces it's made out of, because it has forces going in different directions trapped inside of it. Let's see, I'll read a little more of this. All right, when you accelerate towards the Earth and it stops you from moving, you haven't really stopped. Okay, well, I said that just in a recent video. You still have an ongoing exchange of forces and extra distance, which is delaying the internal functions due to increased distance covered by those forces. The point is there's a multitasking argument. If you're a combination of electrons and protons, you have functions, you have things you're doing, and those things you're doing are exposing you, in some cases, to decay. Okay, so it's like you've got some arrangement that can be caused to break you in half and cause you to become two different atoms, and that's decay rate. And the argument is that when you're moving faster, that's less likely to happen, because you can't be hit a certain way anymore because you're being compressed in one direction and expanded in another direction, however you want to look at it. But it changes you, and by changing you, you're less likely to decay. And that's all we have evidence of, is that movement causes less decay. Now, you can understand that as, like I said, as if an atom has an arrangement. You could also say there could be a cycle inside of it, a little timed cycle that spirals out slowly and slowly, and that's when the atom decays. And if that's true, then movement would also delay that, because movement means multitasking. If you're doing something, and then I say, now move that way, well, then you have to do the something a little bit slower, because you have to take time to keep stepping sideways. So if I asked you to dance as fast as you can, and then I said, move left, you won't be dancing as fast. Just a fact. Alright, it's a simple explanation. You want to make it into a whole bent space-timey thingy, warpy, blah, blah, blah. I'm saying it's a simple relationship between velocity and a change in the metabolism of the things moving. The things moving are physically changed, and by being physically changed, they tell time differently. Okay. Gravitation is inevitable considering the entire universe is sending forces in our directions from surrounding stars. Whether it's from the stars or not, it's like the cosmic background radiation, and you're just arguing there's a whole bunch of that radiation. We don't have a detector to detect. It's not a radio wave, it's not a microwave, it's not a photon. It's a broken one, like the broken ones that go through some kind of harassment. Hello?
Ever? How have you been?
Who?
This is Robert with Endeavor.
Oh, good for you. It's really good that you got a super job harassing people. That's just so cool. Oh, you must feel so proud.
All right, gang.
You must feel so proud. Endeavor. Jesus. What the fuck is that? Endeavor. Not to persevere, but to be a scum. Life is just too tiring. Too depressing. Hideous planet we live on. Just hideous, monstrous creatures. Ugh. It's gross. The bugs are so much prettier. Alright, the world is... it is weird interpretations that are at odds with what really happens. Gravitation is inevitable considering the entire universe is sending forces in our direction from surrounding stars. I'd say it's sending it from all kinds of places. But again, the example is the polarizing filters, right? We kind of know the filters don't destroy the photons because they don't get hot. So clearly the photons are just broken and they get through. And they're in a form you can't see. That's it. Oh, I can't see them. That means they don't exist. No, they're still there. They're just a little broken. You people really don't understand broken. I guess that's the concept here, right? You don't understand broken clock. You think time is actually changing, that distances are changing, that real things in the universe, that the space is actually contracting and expanding or doing some kind of bizarre stuff. That, it's, I'm sorry, it's just a silly explanation. All right. Equilibrium forces atoms together in plants. It's why things tend to become round. Most of it doesn't occur at the frequency or at a detectable ray lengths. Exactly. I mean, it's just a physical fact that we have no detector. We can't see photons that are out of phase. So if I put the photon out of phase, the photon doesn't disappear. It's not non-existent. It's just out of phase, and I have no machine to see, that can detect it. That's it. There's no magic here, but it's still a real force. And when it hits matter, it's still really interacting with it. You just can't see it. All right. It's the only answer that makes sense, and it fits all the evidence. Thank you very much. It's true. So David Murphy says, that sounded a lot like meaningless waffle. So he's making explicit descriptions of why, the distance changes, basically saying what I said, just saying it in text, and he just gives this glib, nothing response. Like, I'm not paying any attention to what you say. I'm just going to say, incomprehensible. Water's wet. Incomprehensible. You're such a coward, David. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, though. What does that mean? You'll say you're sorry? Will you do that? Oh, that'd be super. None of superior minds' assertions can deduce the actual precise formulas. None of... Oh, so this is Swipey Swiper. Isn't that grown up? Wow, what a great name. None of the superior mind's assertions can deduce the actual precise formulas. And again, show me the actual precise formulas actually being done somewhere. Show me where they take the actual precise formulas and apply them to an individual satellite in space right now and an individual human on Earth and 2 clocks. Show me where that's done anywhere on the internet. Because it isn't. Okay. Then it's not physics. Physics is useful with, some more of this. It's about its utility. Yes, religion had a lot of utility. Okay, it got human beings to build giant cathedrals, giant pyramids. It got people to do all kinds of wacky bullshit. Very useful. Was it right? No. With physics, skyscrapers soar. It's more nonsense, right? That kind of basic engineering has nothing to do with general relativity or any of this horse shit, and you know it. Engines turn, and again, all the engines were invented. The whole concept of engine was invented long before quantum mechanics and special relativity. Rockets, look at all this bullshit. Sorry. So you're saying all of physics has to be your physics. So I have to include the like I said, these dopey answers. At least Newton admitted there wasn't enough evidence to draw any conclusions. He had an angel theory. He had lots of different theories, and he knew none of them were good enough. And all that happened in the early 1900s is that the physicists decided, well, let's say it is good enough. And so we'll just make up crap. Again, if Newton had proposed bent space, Newton would have been laughed at. He would have been kicked right the hell out of his exalted position, because it's just too easy to say, well, that's just a non-answer. So you're saying there really is some wooey force that's controlling the universe. So somehow some magical thing controlling the universe, and it just happens to move the speed of light. It happens to move the very same speed that all the real forces move. This magical bent space-time thingy that's not virtual photons, that's not something that moves, that conveys information from one place to another. I mean, it's junk as a theory, and I'm sorry you're so dupable. But you're pathetically dupable and pathetically dishonest. All right, there is not. Okay, let me just see. Planes fly, MRI scan, and the world gets more modern. You say so. I say it gets more religion. It's just another frickin' religion. And, it's clear that through the Industrial Revolution, we squeezed all of the real useful physics out of physics. And we did all that squeezing before, okay, that this revolution. And the fact that things became miniaturized and stuff, and again, that's all trial and error. And if you want to think it's something else, go ahead and be deluded. But it was trial and error that got to the blue LED. Okay, it has a history, a 30-year history. And it's just, little incremental steps where it got better and better and better. And it wasn't some grand quantum mechanical theory that got to it. It was just people doing experiments and trying different things. I mean, you people are just such liars to think your whole civilization is dependent on this wave-particle duality crap, on this, space-time crap. And never will be. Physics unamendable to precise calculation. I don't know what that even means. So again, your calculations aren't precise, they aren't accurate, and you just keep pretending they are. Again, in the photon experiment, the visible light photon experiment with 2 slits, the pattern doesn't match what the math says it should be. The pattern should be a lovely, gradually on and gradually off pattern, and it's not. So why don't you explain why the math doesn't work? And in the multi-slit experiment, in the diffraction gradient, there's no way images could be transmitted to the different locations. They're images of what goes into the grading. Exact images are sent to the different locations. What's your wave interference? How does a random event, okay, how does randomizing the photons, no matter where they go in, it doesn't matter. How can randomizing make an image go to the different locations? Could you answer one of my questions? Just one of you stupid trolls? Could you just answer one of the questions? How does a gravity lens that's exactly the wrong shape magnify space? How does it do that? Okay. Let's call it poetry instead. Yeah, just up yours. These people are a waste of time. They describe obvious and irrefutable facts that we already know and already have math for, and simply put the pieces together. This level of stupidity is absolutely inconceivable. Well, it's perfectly regular for performance on planet the fuck Earth. It's always been covered with liars and shysters and bullshitters. And that's all there are. And that's all that lives in the soul of man is a bug. I've always said it's a bug. Well, I haven't always said it. I certainly said it for the last 10 years. It's a bug planet. They will not have integrity. They will not attempt to do something in any kind of objective manner, to judge anything by the facts. They're horrible jurors of the world and of their own fucking existence. They're just liars all over the place. They love a good lie. It's their favorite thing. Alright, so take a little break and come back for some Ken Wheeler fun. Alright, I should be back. Looks a little jittery. Well, whatever. Just hope for the best. So, Ken Wheeler video. Let's pick one. Geeks and Tesla's ether versus atomism, waves, and space. So it is kind of funny that you put waves in here just because, he seems to be kind of convinced everything's waving. But anyway.
What I learned later is when you make
a
website
annoying,
for your videos or for your work, whatever thing
whatever. You weren't learning that later, did you?
Hey.
Maybe someday I'll be making GoDaddy commercials too. Hilarious.
Even though I bury my head into some really hardcore
Just point out for the facts that GoDaddy has gotten outrageously expensive, and it's like $18 to register a domain name now. $18. It's pathetic.
Tesla, Faraday, Steinmetz, Heaviside, Maxwell, and
Pathetically pathetic.
others, and also there's nothing more brain crushing than translating ancient Greek metaphors.
Okay, so again, it's just always got. I'm qualified to do physics because I've read a bunch of really old books in some babbly language, where they hieroglyphics or something. Yeah, the ancients had all the knowledge. They didn't know what a microbe was. Come on.
Physics. Ultimately, everything is irreducibly simple.
Irreducibly simple. I mean, I would argue that ultimately, yes, the complex things are made out of simple things. That, yeah, it's not some more complex thing that we're made out of. There's simple functions. Square, round. Yes, the fundamental universe is a bunch of square and round.
I'm not ever going to be accused. Well, people could accuse me of it, but I'm never going to be found guilty.
Yeah, why? Because there's no real court of integrity. You'll never have to go to the real court of integrity.
The fact of complicating Mother Nature. I mean, ultimately, it is very simplex and simplistically.
So he keeps using these terms, simplex. Ultimately, it's very simplex, and then he'll draw pictures of freaking hyperborealoids and tornadoes and all of this stuff, and there's nothing simple about those mechanisms. No, not simple.
Reducible. I've said this before, that there is...
You said everything before, like 4 billion times before. Every single phrase can be highlighted. If there was a little highlight machine that just showed the parts that have already been said, that sentence, already been said, already been said, already been said, already been said. It's already been said, Ken.
There's never been a point in time anywhere in history or currently where there have been postulated any two foundations. Kind of like when you build a house, you got to lay a concrete foundation upon which you build the rest of the thing.
Right, and your concrete foundation is hyperborealoid tornadoes that makes magnets smash together somehow. Doesn't. There's no theory. There's no... Again, you've never drawn a picture of why this creates a mechanism that forces the stuff. We can't even say little bits because he doesn't believe in little bits. I don't know what he believes in. I don't know what's toroiding around what. There's just toroids around toroids or something.
There have never been any two foundations postulated or put forward or theorized, except for two. One being atomism.
Again, which is this idea that you slice it in half and you slice it in half and you get these little pieces. That's right. And, regular physics makes the mistake because they don't even understand that, you slice the little pieces like a magnet and you slice it and you slice it and you slice it. It keeps creating two magnets. And then eventually you slice it and you get to an atom and you slice it. And what do you get? You get an electron and you get a proton. The magnetic monopoles. Yeah, they're too stupid to even figure that out. But Tesla certainly had no clue. The alternative is worse.
Yeah. And the other one being the correct one, by the way. The ether. There's never been other...
The ether. And what is the ether? What is it? Do you believe in a particularized ether? Or do you believe the ether is what? One consistent substance? It's not like water made out of molecules. It's instead, what? What is this ether? What is this ether? What is it?
Then these two. One is completely illogical.
No, one is completely rational. There's somethings and there's nothing between the somethings. Perfectly rational to me. I totally get it. Why would I want to put something in the something? There's already something in the something.
Occam's razor, and the other one's completely untenable. There's a word everybody should learn, by the way. Untenable. Untenable.
Indefensible would be a good word too. Incoherent. Obnoxiously stupid. That would be good if people could figure out what that meant.
meaning unrealistic is impossible, kind of like unicorns and leprechauns, right?
Right, so you didn't prove any of that impossibility. We're just comparing models, Ken. Okay, so you're saying all the models that don't have ether in them are missing the magical what? The magical compressible thing. Well, do the bits compress? They're this big? How big are these ether bits that are compressing? And how are they compressing? No, we don't get a diagram of any of this crap. Again, every fluid or every substance we know has this ether-like quality, like Jello. Jello has an ether-like quality, and the waves will fly across it, and you can make it jiggle. But I mean, we know, right? Physics knows that the Jello is dissectable. You can turn it into Jello molecules.
These phantasms. These are
Phantasms.
nonsenses. By the way, I also want to get something else out of the way.
Yeah, I should get something out of the way too. Yeah, I should speed you up is what I should do, just a little bit.
I've actually quoted Tesla, Heaviside, Max.
Right, I've seen the Tesla quotes. He's all over the place, and he's a religious kook. So, but nothing else to say. Yeah, nothing needs saying.
Well, Dollard and others, who said there's no such thing as an electron particle. I said everything is fields.
Yeah, I know, but your problem is if there's no such thing as an electron particle, then there might as well be no such thing as a proton particle, and then you're stuck with charge, and you don't have any explanation for what charge is. I mean, you can do this. Well, there's something, not a proton or not an electron, that's creating a flow of ether going this way on one side, and it's going this way on the other side. But you don't really have an explanation where all the energy comes from for all that stuff, and then you don't have any good evidence that that's going to create really intense attraction and repulsion. I mean, charge isn't just a little force, it's a really powerful force. And it's not being created by a whole bunch of swirling ether. Come on. People, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't smash things together or fly them apart.
Fields are not particles, but at no point in time in any video have I ever denied, the fundamental particle, nuclear particles.
Okay, so there's nuclear particles, but they're not electrons. Okay.
It's a scientific fact of which I'm in full agreement with, rarely so, but am in full agreement with scientists who said that like a free neutron, after...
So, a free neutron, okay, something made out of protons and electrons.
Or something like 17 minutes turns into a proton. Well, if all neutrons turn into protons, then what would...
Well, they don't turn into just protons. They turn into protons plus the opposite charged electron. So again, are you being honest, Ken? Do you understand integrity and honesty? Physics doesn't say it turns into a proton. That's not what physics says. Show me where physics says that. Show me where a physicist said that. Oh, that's right, they didn't say that. So you're just, it's not a straw man, it's just a big fat lie man. I mean, it's just so fake.
We call a neutron. It's nothing other than an electrostatic paradigm as it sits in...
Okay, it's an electrostatic paradigm. Okay, so that's really simplex, right? I mean, everybody knows that electrostatic paradigms are just so simplex. I mean, it's that simple like green, Electric paradigm and green. Yeah, they're equally simple. No.
Situ in the nuclear center, that we would call it something else. So ultimately, and this of course would follow Occam's razor, there's only fundamentally one particle.
Okay, there's one particle, so at least we have that. So we have the ether particle, and somehow the ether particle creates charge, which means it creates two fundamentally differently reacting things, yin and yang, out of one thing. So the one thing somehow becomes two completely different things through some sort of yangy yin rositizing. I don't know.
And I've never at any point in time denied nuclear particles. Never.
Well, you're denying. Yes, you are. So that's just silly to say I'm not denying it when you're saying there's no such thing as an electron particle. That's denying half the story. It's at least half.
I've actually been accused several times recently by... And people are just putting words in my mouth because I've never...
Oh, please. You put plenty of words in your own mouth. Nobody else. There's no room for any more fucking jargon and words. You've already shoved a ton of stuff in your mouth. Kind of obviously.
Ever,
About a ton.
ever denied nuclear particles. I've not. I have.
All right, that was a cheap shot. I mean, people get fat and they stay fat. Okay, so it's like, yeah, he stopped putting a ton of junk in his mouth years ago, but he never gave the extra time to get out. He never. So he's reached, thermal equilibrium. Food equilibrium. But he hasn't fixed the part where he didn't give anything back. He just took.
Said that they're dielectric condensates, somewhere in the order of 60 to 100 magnitudes. Maybe.
Well, whatever that means, 60 to 100 magnitudes of magnitudeness.
Even higher than that of gamma radiation. These nuclear particles are nothing other than ZTPs, or zero-time particle.
Zero-time particle. So this is simplex again. Zero-time particle. Yep, just like Yulla, and zero-time particle. Just as simple. Water is wet. Zero-time particle. Yeah, just as obvious. The two things are just as obvious as each other.
Basically, and I say this humorously, however, it is also denotatively very descriptive, so it's both humorous.
It's denotatively by description and definition. So he's asserting a truth.
And descriptive. I've called it jokingly hard light, which is.
Oh yeah, great, fantastic. What does that mean? So he's saying gamma rays. The higher the frequency, the harder the photon. So it's the same bullshit where they've fallen for this nonsense that frequency is what the universe cares about, when no, it just cares about momentum. And it's just because of certain circumstances of the atom that, momentum can matter, in the sense that you can push the pendulum when it's coming towards you, or you can push it when it's going away from you, and the two have a different outcome. In one case, the pendulum stops moving. In the other case, the pendulum moves twice as much.
I love calling it hard light because there's both denotative and funny, and it's easy to remember. I call it hard light, and it sounds kind of ridiculous, but fundamentally, this would be the reconciliation of light and matter. It would be the reconciliation of a lot of things.
Light and matter, reconciliation, all of this stuff. So, if you understand the light to be a stream of particles, and then you say the closer they are together, the harder they are, and you could say that matter has this hard light in it. I could go for that, but that's not what you're saying.
And it also followed Occam's razor. So I've never at any point in time denied particles.
So he says it follows Occam's razor to say this, to say something like hard light there. I've said something very simplex. I've got the simple answer. No, that's not simple.
But
that's like high pressure, and you're saying, well, how do you keep high pressure in your little atom box? What's keeping it in there if there's no electrons?
Moving on. We also have two paradigms, and one, of course, as I've already stated, one is atomism, the other one is the ether, but there are also two other paradigms that fall in line with that scientists and...
So he said ether and something else. I forgot already. Shit. Okay, ether and... Man, damn it.
People that are...
rock and rockier. Yeah. It's comparing a rock to a rock. Yeah.
And experts on field theory, all Tesla, Steinmetz, Heaviside, Maxwell, so on and so forth.
Whatever. I'd hardly say Maxwell was an expert on field theory, but whatever. You want to stretch, you want to play the game, go ahead. Again, Tesla burned holes in the ground, spent millions of dollars to build a machine that wasted electricity, and that's all he accomplished.
They keep talking about, the atomists are always talking about waves in space. Now, there's no such thing as a wave. A wave is not a thing. That would be like saying, I saw happiness.
Waves in space, like waves in the ocean. What's wrong with saying that? You're saying it's an ether, so why not just say you say space is ether, okay? They're saying space is something, okay? It's space-time, so it's a geodesic something or other. It's a mathematical thingy of some kind of math controlling the universe. Whatever who knows? I mean, Einstein said, yeah, it's got to be an ether of some kind, some sort of stuff. Something, the nothing is something. You're saying the nothing is something. So you're saying the same thing. So you're just arguing over semantics. So why don't you just stick with the quote where Einstein said, yeah, well, bent space has to be thought of as like an ether. So why don't you just go with that? and just say, okay, we agree. But instead, you play this game like they're saying something different than you. You are conventional wooey physics.
Or I saw sadness. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? Who did you see that was happy? Or so I was like, no, I saw happy. It's like, you're smoking.
So it's obviously not the same thing. Again, I see a wave in an ocean. I can understand what it is. It's a bunch of little individual molecules of water bumping into each other. And when they do that in sequence, they make the water expand because the water can't compress the water. It's uncompressible. So it forces there to be a bulge in the air. Okay, because the water won't compress. That's all. And so you're saying the ether does the same thing. It bulges. How does it do that in these perfect straight lines? How does it, it doesn't make any sense that, your dominoes, 1 minute the dominoes all spread out and fly apart in all directions, and the next minute they go in a dead straight line from point A to point B. It doesn't make much sense.
Smoking crack. Put down the crack pipe. These are not things. These are attributes. Like, I'm happy or I'm sad. That's an attribute of me or of you. We can't.
Yeah, everybody knows this one. So he's arguing that somehow somebody, like even conventional physics, thinks there's a wave and nothing. Well, clearly they call it an electric field and a magnetic field, and they don't mean field like it's being created by something moving through empty space. They think of it as some sort of thing, an ether, a jello, and that the jello is wobbling, and that the little bits feel the wobble of the jello and they start wobbling and some sort of crap like that. But that makes, again, it has no continuity. As soon as you try to draw a picture of it, the picture falls apart. It becomes incomprehensible mush because the photon is giant. Thousands of atoms in polarization, thousands of atoms. And yet we're supposed to believe it's just jiggling this electron right here. That's the only one.
Say, I was walking down the street and I saw sadness, and people would be like, what are you smoking? What sort of illegal drug are you smoking?
Well, we do see it, though. You walk down the street, you see sadness. You can see some homeless guy choking on garbage or some other kind of thing. You can see sadness in people. You can see sadness in the sense that it looks like something you should be sad to witness. You can see sad circumstances. You can see it. It's right there in front of you. So your analogy is stupid. Because of course we can see it. It's happening to things, just like the water is being waved.
What's wrong with you? Did you fall and hit your head? These are not things. The waves are not things. Waves are what things do. The scientists love to talk about waves, and they love to talk about bending space.
And they talk about what the waves do. They don't love talking about the actual wave. I wish they would talk about the actual wave and what the actual wave is made out of and how many waves are in the wave and all of that. That would be really great if they actually talked about the wave. They just talk about what the waves do. They do exactly what you do. Do.
You might as well be talking about bending unicorn farts. You might as well be talking about... what color is Poseidon's beard? It's like, well, it's a fictional.
So let's understand, they have the same theory, okay? They believe in the same thing. They believe that this is all just vibrations and stuff, okay? So the only thing that's happening is stuff is doing this, okay? Nothing goes anywhere, nothing does anything. It's just little vibrations in the vibrato field. So they have the same theory. That's what their what is that, unified field theory? Is that what they call it? In physics, quantum unified. It's just based on some kind of notion. That's what string theory is based on. Is that everything's just little bits of little strings, and some of the strings are round, and some of the strings are straight, and they just go compressy and uppy. They're little bendy strings.
We don't need to argue over Poseidon's beard color because there's no such creature. It doesn't exist. It's a phantasm. The notion of bending space, Tesla said it famously over and over again. This is why he called Einstein a fuzzy-haired crackpot.
And that's useful somehow, right? I mean, that sounds like just ad hominem crap. I mean, Einstein could have called Tesla, whatever, a scrawny chin holder upper, because he did a lot of holding up of his chin.
And a lunatic. It's because you can't bend.
That's just kind of rude. Okay, Einstein was wrong, in my opinion. insanely, sillily wrong, and a bunch of people fell for it because they're dupes. Because you can fool some of the people like all of the time.
Space, because space has no properties. Also, too, it is a hard.
So he says space has no properties, but again, you're giving it properties. You're saying space is ether. You're saying space doesn't exist. So why even talk about it when you don't think it exists? You're saying there is no such thing as space. There's just ether clumps, and that's it. And the clumps are right next to each other, and the clumps can't move without moving each other, and that's it. There is no empty space, in your opinion. Why not just say that?
Core fact that no field modality has ever terminated in space. Space is not a terminal or a ground for a field modality. I assume you know what
a field modality. So again, that's so simplex. Field modality and scissors. Which is more complicated? Scissors are field modality. Right? This is kind of simplex, right? I mean, little sharp edge comes next to little sharp edge. Kind of figure out what can happen, right? So that's scissor simplex. Field modality, not so simple.
Electrical ground is, right? No charge or discharge is ever terminated in space. Is not a terminal. Terminate in counter space.
No charge or discharge is ever discharged or well, you can see it. The experiments demonstrate that something sure as hell happens between the two things. So again, this is just, he just says stuff like it's true and it ain't true.
We say subspace or 0 point energy instead of the ether, but
okay, 0 point energy again. This is scissors, 0 point energy. Yeah, which one is more simplex? Shit.
Space has no properties. It only has attributes, like a shadow. A shadow is not a thing.
So it has no properties, but it has attributes. Again, just in terms of vocabulary, it's impossible to have an attribute that isn't by definition a property. Okay? I mean, so you're just saying, okay, why do I always go for the juvenile metaphors? Let's see if I can come up with an adult metaphor. Coffee pot percolating too much and the coffee spills out of the pot or something. We won't bother with explaining why it spilled out of the pot. We'll just say it spills out of pot. No, you can't say the spilling out of the pot is a property of making the coffee too hot. Too hot a pot makes coffee spill out, and that's a property. It's not. You can't sit there and say it's. I can disconnect attributes from properties. You have to have a cause. The properties are the cause. The attribute is the effect. You can't have effects without a cause, Ken. It's just breaking logic.
A shadow is an absence of light. There's no distinction between
an absence of light again, and it's only a shadow by comparison to light. So you can't say it's a shadow when it's next to a shadow, next to a shadow, next to a shadow, right? A shadow isn't anything next to nothing. So again, you're just saying the light is different than the non-lit state. That's all you're saying, and that's all physics is saying. And he's making it sound like it's something that the simple way of looking at it is yes, you can't see a shadow if it's in shadow. So yes, of course, there's nothing.
in a shadow, and there's no also distinction of space because it has absolutely no properties.
Yes, something has properties, nothing has no properties. That would make sense, yes. But they're not suggesting nothing. Space, time is not nothing. It's a whole complex structure that's making stuff move all over the place. So why are you arguing as if they say space is nothing? They're clearly not saying space is nothing. Clearly. And yet you're arguing as if your position is different than theirs. It's the same position. And stupid.
This is complete and utter nonsense. This is concept reification, by the way.
Concept reification. The whole point is yes, the concepts have an origin, right? So a concept like wet, we can tie the origin to somebody got wet and said, the other guy said, you're all wet. Yeah, that's it. That's the rarefication of it. Okay, that's the essence of the word is the concept was made out of the event of becoming wet and labeling it with a word. And that's where all the vocabulary comes from. It's labeling stuff that's real. It's not labeling things that aren't real. So shadow has a word because next to the world we live in, which is covered in light, it's easy to see shadow in a world covered in light. So nothing becomes obvious. We gave nothing a word. There's a word saying nothing, right? Not because nothing is something, but because you can see nothing when there's a bunch of something around it. When you frame nothing, it's pretty obvious it's nothing when you frame it with something. Now that's understandable. That's simplex. Your nonsense isn't simplex.
This is a posterior attribute reification. It actually falls under the heading of several.
Posterior attribute verification. So who cares where the attribute came from, whether it came out of its butt or its head? Doesn't even matter. It's an attribute. An attribute means it has a cause. Effects have causes.
Fallacies. So on one hand of the idiot atomists, we actually have talked about waves in space. But waves don't exist, and space has no properties. You can't bend space.
So clearly waves do exist, so that's just silly to say. And clearly they've given space properties, so yes. And how are the properties any different than the silly properties you're giving space, the ether? No different.
On the other hand of logical folks who actually have logically forwarded the ether, and what is the ether? The
ether is just another way of saying bent space-time. Just imagine another way of saying the magical stuff does it. The magical stuff makes stuff move. The magical stuff did it.
Is non-Cartesian.
I mean, if you ask him why does the Earth move into the sun, he's going to start drawing a bunch of donuts. It's going to be nonsense. The explanation is going to be silly. It is not going to be simple. It's going to be extraordinarily bizarre.
Potential. All field modalities, whether that be electrostatic or magnetic, are ultimately only two, and those are the two conjugate geometries of the universe. Specifically,
So again, there's only one really, and that's charge. Charge. Electron, proton, opposite reaction to the field. They interpret the field exactly opposite. When one of them's going this way, the other one says, I have to go that way. They're completely are yin-yang. And they're the cause of electricity, which is movement through atoms. I mean, there's no such thing as an electric field. And magnetism. Now, that one creates a field. That one is charge, though. The field is made of charge. And when you put charges close together into dipoles, they create magnetism.
Toroidal geometry of force and motion, and the hyperboloidal geometry of increasing inertia and acceleration.
So they're increasing acceleration, blah 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 from magical nowhere.
Electricity is phi times psi equals q Planck electric.
There, that's answers the question, right? And that's so simple. Phi times psi times electrification. Yeah, that's as simple as scissors. Yeah. I don't think so. It's so simplex. Psi times phi times blah 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 electrification. It's so simple. An idiot could do it.
In other words, it's a hybrid of dielectricity and magnetism. And gravity is not a field at all. Gravity is an anti-field.
An anti-field. Oh, please. The anti-field. So that has to be truly nothing, I guess. So Ken does believe in nothing. So somewhere there's holes in the ether. The ether gets... You pull the jello apart and there's no jello. And that's gravity. It says him. Draw me a picture? No, we won't get a picture of that.
Typically, gravity is mutual mass acceleration.
It is mutual mass acceleration through the Mutual Omaha insurance policy. I mean, what is that? Mutual mass acceleration. For what reason? What is compelling the, whatever it is, the clump of ether to move? To accelerate.
It is electrostatic acceleration.
Oh, so it's electrostatic, which can't travel through nothing, so it has to travel through something. And how's it doing that? How is it communicating this, whatever it is, this you must come to me thing? Why must it? Can't you give me a simplex explanation for why it must?
Electric acceleration, actually. And,
It's electric and dielectric, actually. Actually, it's dielectric, or phi electric, or psi times phi electric.
not actually also accelerating towards one another, but they're actually accelerating towards the lowest pressure point.
Oh, right. And why are they? Because they can do math, and they can figure out where the middle is, and they'll both go towards the middle. I mean, you can say that about anything, right? I mean, any situation where two things are moving towards each other, you could just say, they're moving towards the middle! When they're obviously not. I mean, like, you see the hot chick at the grocery store, and you say, I think I need to buy something over there. You know, he's arguing, no, you're not heading for the hot chick. No, you're heading for, you know, whatever, muffin paper cup thingies. You know, you need some of those paper things to pour muffin batter into. And so that's what you're really heading for. Because that's right in between you and the hot chick. Anybody could say something stupid like that, but it's stupid. You have to be stupid to say stupid things.
Of counter space. Let's ask a question here. If I had an empty box, which I don't have right here in front of me, you know, I got something similar to a box. It's kind of a box. This is empty. It's a lens tube. You know, would you think that the air inside of this box is a property of the box? I'd like you to think about that question for a second.
It just kind of depends on how, yes, you frame the question, right? I mean, it depends on what, am I going to put it into space? Well, if I'm going to put it into space and there's a decent seal on there, well, then the air becomes part of the container. Yes, there's a something inside the container. If I take something and trap it inside the box and then I put the box into a field of nothing, well, there's still something inside the box because I didn't let the something out.
If we actually want to talk about reifying space, which has no properties.
So reifying, again, dissecting space, figuring out how does it work. What is space? That's what he's saying by reifying. What is it?
Would the air inside of this box be a property of the box? Think hard about it.
Well, I mean, you're asking a kind of a silly question. Is the utility of a glass, is a glass useful if I don't put anything in it? Well, obviously it wouldn't be a glass then. It would just be kind of a funny shaped piece of crap, right? I mean, if I never put anything in it, okay, if it never is used for the box purpose, then yeah, I guess it's something, but it's not a glass, right? So it's not that's a thing's utility is often its definition. So yes, the explicit answer would be no, the stuff inside the box isn't the box. The box is a container by definition. The glass isn't what you put in it. It's what it can do. Hold liquid.
About that before answering this one. Is the air inside of a box a property of the box? The answer is no. By changing the nature of that air, or say vacuuming out that air, creating a negative vacuum, would that change anything about the box?
A negative vacuum. Negative compared to what? Not negative compared to space. Your vacuum isn't going to be more vacuumy than the space, right? It's pretty hard to vacuum all the stuff out, right? Because the only way you can vacuum it out is you have to, to catch the electrons, you have to put a proton in there and pull the electrons out. And to get the electrons out, you got to put a proton in and pull the electrons out. I mean, there's, not too many ways to evacuate things entirely because you have to basically hook them with something.
No, it wouldn't. No, you might say, well, if you actually evacuate it. I know if you'll actually collapse the box, but that's called taking the analogy too far. Science is...
Yes, yeah, exactly. So your own word gibberish can be used against you to say, no, your answer isn't correct, Ken, because the box will no longer be a box if I take all the air out. Seal the box and take all the air out, then the box becomes just a little hunk of crap. Yeah. It doesn't have box shape anymore. It's not doing glass anymore. Like if I break this, right? Same difference as me vacuuming all the energy out and letting it crush. I could just hit it with a hammer and break it into a million pieces, and I could say it's not glass anymore. Big deal. So thank you for playing little word games. That's what physics should be, is little word games. Blah, 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 blah.
Never, ever defined a field. The ancient Greek word is kora. Kora.
Oh, yeah, like they know what a field talking about energy and its distribution in the universe. That's what they meant by field. No, I think they meant by field is, hey, there's a bunch of the same stuff growing over that whole patch there. Let's call that a field. Or a battlefield, or, you know. They weren't doing physics, Ken.
It's never defined a field. What is a field? If you can't explain it simply, you simply don't understand it. That's actually a quote from Einstein, ironically enough. That's one thing he got right, just like a broken clock. It was right twice a day, right?
Yeah, Einstein was witty. And he came up with a few witticisms that are quite nice. And I wouldn't say that's all that witty, just pointing out how, you should be able to draw a picture of it. But I mean, Einstein violated his own principles all over the place. I mean, I don't think Einstein was all that confident he had the right answer. That's why he was pursuing a better answer. It's because he didn't think the answer that existed was good enough. But once he had gotten all the wackos running with the religion, he couldn't stop it. The religion had a mind of its own. Just like Jesus doesn't really have anything to do with Christianity,
A field is an ether perturbation modality, just like ice, water, and steam. Now, if you're an ignorant child, you would think that ice is one thing and water is another and steam is another.
That's why we gave them different names. That's right. They are different things because it's the arrangement of chemistry that makes them different. So again, there's no point in saying carbon is a diamond because carbon isn't always a diamond. Carbon is sometimes graphite. Completely different. Functions completely different. Does completely different things. So, but it's still carbon. We don't sit there and pretend, we don't know it's still the same molecule, it's just in a different arrangement. So nobody believes it's the same arrangement of a molecule. So what's the point of this? Again, it's just word games.
Steam is hot and gaseous, and water is wet and liquid, and ice is hard and cold. Oh, these are different things. No, they're the same thing. They're just different.
They're not the same thing. Okay, just fundamentally not the same thing. Diamond is not the same as graphite. A lead pencil just isn't the same thing.
Temperature and pressure modalities of water, right? Yes. There's no need for a grand unified theory because from the perspective of Mother Nature, Natura naturans, everything...
Natura naturans, Mother Nature, baby, that's just baby talk. There's no Mother Nature. There's no mechanical mind controlling the universe. There's no such thing. There's elemental functions. So you're claiming there's one ether thingy, and somehow the ether thingy gets into the arrangement of two charged elements that fundamentally react differently to the ether thingy. I'm saying that's implausible as a starting point. And that if you don't create two kinds of ether, then you're never going to make the electrons and protons do the two kinds of things. 2 plus 2 plus 2 physics. I'm the one arguing for the simple physics. Two kinds of force, two kinds of matter, and two kinds of interaction, and that's all you need. Simple.
Thing is already unified. We don't have to unify what's already unified. The only reason we can't unify it is because human beings are too stupid.
Some of them are really, really big in their stupidness.
That's correct. There is only the conjugate geometries of force and motion, inertia, and acceleration.
Right, okay. There's only the conjugate geometry of force and acceleration and motion or inertia, or whatever the fuck he said. And that's simple, like yellow.
Dielectricity and magnetism. We've already explained away gravity. We've already explained away electricity as a hybrid of dielectricity.
Well, you haven't explained anything. You haven't come close to even drawing anything like even the crudest of stick figure diagrams. Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
And magnetism, which also makes explaining how an electromagnet works really, really easy. A lot of people spend like 20 pages explaining what the hell an electromagnet is and how it works.
They all explain it wrong, okay, because they don't know how it works. They don't even know that when you cut an atom in half, there's a electron on one side and a proton on the other side, and that's the dipoles of magnetism, the monopoles. The monopoles are the same monopoles that create charge and electricity. That's why they look like the same force, is because they are the same force.
So you can explain it really easy if you understand what electricity is. But yeah, a field is an ether perturbation modality, just like ice, water, and steam.
Right, an ether perturbation modality. So the ether is the modality, so that's kind of redundant, right? Ether is a perturbation modality. That's what you should be saying. And ether is magnetism and electricity and gravity and everything. That's okay. But again, you're not explaining how your perturbations know how to be confined or direct or any of that. You're just saying it's all dominoes, but I'm not explaining how the dominoes function. And then he starts hyperburloiding. Do you really believe that dominoes are hyperburloiding? Oh, come on.
It's the temperature and pressure modality of, specifically usually it's the temperature modality, but the temperature and pressure modality of water. But science has never defined a field, because to define a field, you would actually have to first posit the...
Either have you. So again, you're just saying it exists. You're saying your ether exists, and then your non-ether, your counter space exists, or whatever the hell it is, the non-magnitude space. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense.
ether, but they are afraid of positing the ether. They do it cryptically. They actually will call it quantum foam. There's like 100... There's, no.
I want to give you an example of...
Oh. Yes. Well, that's an example I like. Thank you very much. I think I'll enjoy that for a little while. Yes. Where I live here, it's just like the ugliest street in New Jersey or something. I haven't seen a pretty girl in a year. Almost, 8 months or whatever. There isn't any.
of how marketing and Squarespace together gave me this dream life. This video is for
almost 100. Where's it up?
I don't think that's a green light or not, but whatever.
4 primary things they actually call the ether without using the word ether, because saying ether...
Yes, exactly. So why are you bitching? So all their big crime is they're not calling it ether, but they're basically describing it as ether. So you win. Why are you complaining? You both believe in wacky ether crapola, and both of you have no freaking clue how it works. Because you can't explain charge. You can't explain magnets. You're hopelessly deluded and wrong. And the wrongness is obvious because your explanations are impossible to illustrate.
To a modern scientist who's not really a scientist or a mathematician is like crying out the devil in the middle of Sunday school. You just don't do that. You don't talk about the ether because that's the big...
I mean, Faraday had he tried to explain all this stuff. He drew pictures of it and he said, well, look, if I make this model with gears and then I put the little universal gear or whatever you call it in between the two, well, then that gear could move up and down and this thing could happen. And, he tried to create a mechanism, but he knew it wasn't, it's not, it doesn't really work right. Okay, it does some stuff, but it doesn't really work. Why don't you just concede, Ken? You don't have the answer. Why are you claiming you've got it solved when your mechanism doesn't really work? It doesn't really work. You can't show us the diagram, the construction of the machine. Our reality is like a Rube Goldberg machine or whatever, right? And the physics it's the job of the physicist to kind of explain how it works. And the funny thing is that it's really all just the same stuff, just in slightly different orientations, like the water molecule in different arrangements. And so it's just kind of understanding that, that's all that all the little elements of the Rube Goldberg are really just a Rube Goldberg of something simpler. And, getting to that core. And you haven't gotten to the core. You haven't gotten to the 2 + 2 + 2 physics at all. You're nowhere close to the simple answer.
E-word. It's the evil word. You can't talk about the ether. When you talk about the ether, you completely destroy the foundation of atomism. Atomism is built upon fallacy reifications and nonsense. Talk about waves and space. Space has no
Again, you're compressed ether to make matter. You have no structure. You have no explanation how the ether is different where the somethings are and where the nothings are. You have nothing to explain the function at all. There's no mechanical blueprint drawn. There's no, you haven't submitted your patent in any kind of rational terms. There's nothing to be debated because you don't say anything. You just say ether and it perturbates and it magnitudes and it coaxials. But you don't say anything about how the frig it does any of that crap.
properties. There's no such thing as bending space. Time is only a measure of magnitudes. Time is not.
No, time is not a measure of magnitudes. Time is the measure of the speed at which the universe, bits inside the universe are moving. If they moved instantaneously from point A to point B, there wouldn't be any time because everything would happen instantaneously, and therefore there wouldn't be anything happening because it all happened already. But the fact is the universe can't get from point A to point B instantaneously. It just can't do it. And so there's time, and that's all it is. It's just a function of the elemental bits moving less than instantaneous speed. So because they're going some speed slower than instantaneous, that's why there's time. Period. Period. The end of the definition. It doesn't need, that's the simple definition of time. It's how long the elemental functions of the universe take. Period. Most specifically, the photon.
Thing at all. Time is the number 4, by the way, and it's also the only number.
Time is the number 4. Okay, now we're done, right? I mean, that's just about enough, isn't it? Yeah, that's just about enough. Now he's going to get into numerology. Time is the number 4. That's simple, like scissors. It's so obvious how that works. Time is 4 and scissors. Yeah, that's equally simple. No. All right. I shall retire to Bedlam, as Scrooge would say. You people be just too ludicrous. And so, till the next time. If I'm still here. Really, I can just feel my enthusiasm engine just running down and running down. I'm just like, endeavor to persevere, Gary. Oh, fuck you. I mean, I really don't want to endeavor to persevere. But we'll see if I do. Just not seeing it. Yeah, I was kind of hoping I would just drop dead right now, but it just didn't happen. Shit. Okay. I guess I'm going to endeavor to persevere whether I like it or not. Shit.